Now all we need to do something in an order to create this kind of radio checkbox into our project. So how to do it? Now the basic trick is we cannot change the default radio button properties as exhibited by the browser. So that is why we will conceal those particular radio buttons. Those are practically maintaining some default properties, and if we can customize these particular label elements over here, then it is possible that we are getting practically this kind of display into our project. So that is why if we now get back to form-style.css, and if we now say the property, all those properties as specified by this form holder. So we are now practically customizing this form holder element over here. This is the div that we are talking about, form holder. Copy this thing, get back to form-style.css, paste it. Now write down the properties as width, or say we are working with 1000 pixels of div. The padding of the element, it should be 10 pixels. Box sizing, border box. So we don't need to make any kind of calculation if we have turned on this particular command over here. The background property, we are now setting it to, for say, this one, and we are now putting a margin property of 0 auto condition. First of all, get back to your project and reload, and you can see that this will be the result. All those radio buttons, those are practically gathered into the central position of your web page, and for sake of simplicity, let's assume that we will be creating another input type here, which is known as submit, and the value will be submit now. Reload, everything is in order. Now all we are going to do in this form-style.css, in the next case, we will now conceal the particular radio buttons, those being created over here. So all we are going to do, the input element which has a type of radio here, those will be concealed. That means the display will be none. There it goes. Reload, and you can see that all those particular radio buttons, those are off from the screen. We cannot see it. All we can see now is just all those label elements, those we have created so far. So in the second case, let's get back to form-style.css. Here, let's customize those label elements, those we have created so far. This is the background color. Let's assume that the color will be white color. Let's provide this padding of 10 pixels and an individual width of 100 pixels. This is the radio element. We have concealed those radio buttons. So for the moment, if we reload, we can see that this will be the result over here. Now all we are doing over here, we are practically creating this form holder input. We will have to specify the type. Which type? Which has a radio type. On being checked, the immediate label element The immediate level element means if we check this particular radio element over here which has a level of Pankaj, then this is the immediate level element of this particular radio button over here. So we are practically specifying that this particular level element which is immediate to the adjacent selected radio button, it will be having some style properties over here. So what kind of style properties it should execute? It should be having a background color of, for say, white, and the color of a little bit of dark ash color. Let's get back to our project and see what is the result. So we can see that in the first case, Pankaj was the one which was selected over here, which is always checked in case of the first time, for the very first time, when the page is being loaded. So that is why Pankaj is now selected in this particular order. Rest of these level elements, those practically remain unselected, and that is why they are exactly displaying all those properties here. We have set these properties in case of these level elements that its background should be this one, the color will be white, it will be having a padding of 10 pixels and a width of 100 pixels, so everything will be right over here. In that particular case, we can see that this will be the result. And on the other case, we set the display of this particular level element will be inline block. If we now reload, we can see that this will be the result over here. We may set this particular input type submit button to come down into a separate line. So this will be the result so far. In the previous case, we have defined a div class of form holder that we had customized over here. There it goes. Then we had provided an input type with radio button. So we had stated that any element inside this particular form holder which has a type of radio, it will be having a display of none. In the next case, we have turned off the display of this particular radio element. So now we are customizing the level element over here. What will be the properties of these particular level elements? It has been defined in the next line of syntax. We have defined that any level element which is practically aligning into this particular form holder, it will be having all those properties over here. And in the last case, we have defined that any input which has a type of radio inside this particular form holder div class, on being checked, the immediate level element against this particular input type, selected input type radio button, it will be having a background color of white and it will be having a color of ID hashtag 666. This is what we had defined over here, and that is what is being exactly executed here. You can see that all those leveled elements, those are practically being selected. Those are having a different background color and a different font color. Reload in the first case. Let's have another test. Get back to form style CSS, and in case of this form holder input type radio, just turn it off. There it goes. Get back to your project and reload, and you can see that this particular radio item, it has been selected against Pankaj level element. It is selected, so that is why the immediate level element of Pankaj, it is now having a different background color and a different font color. If you select this armor, you can see that the same change is being observed over here. In case of Dhiman, same thing been shown over here. In case of Oni, the same thing is been shown over here. All we did, we just concealed this particular radio button. Those we cannot stylize, those been defined as default properties for a particular individual browser. So we are now uncommenting this particular display none property. Get back to your project and reload, and you can see that this is the result. So we have successfully stylized our radio button element. Hope this will aid you into your project in practically creating something new, something innovative to create your project. Hope you guys have liked this tutorial. If you guys have liked this tutorial, then do not hesitate to hit that particular red subscribe button. Thanks for watching us. Until next, goodbye.